Don't you hate it when video game franchises just pump out the same old game year after year, maybe change a few maps or a few encounters, call it something completely different, and then just get a huge payday? How about when they just repackage an old game with shiny new graphics, call it something completely new, and then just say that's good enough instead of actually trying to make something new and original? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Deckerlink, the trained unprofessional, and thank God Pokemon is not what I was just describing. Those criticisms are something more befitting of a Call of Duty or an Assassin's Creed, made by these companies that have this terrible reputation for making old games, just repackaging them, and then calling them new year after year, trying to capitalize on old hype. And yet, to an outsider of the gaming community, these practices might not be all that different compared to companies like Nintendo that are constantly making new Mario games, but with the name being somewhat similar and the packaging being somewhat similar on the outside, these all look kind of just like the same game over and over again, just changing out world, or bros, or land, or galaxy, or maker. Jesus, there's a lot of fucking Mario games. There's one right there. You see him? He's fucking watching, man. And, like Mario, Pokemon seems to be following this trend very well, with just about every color and rock imaginable being used to represent one Pokemon game or another over the past 20 years. However, if I wanted to do Pokemon any amount of justice, I could not tackle this subject by myself, so I enlisted the help of one of my good friends. Please say hello to Ivy McCurdy.
Hi everybody, my name is Ivy. As you can tell, I'm a very big fan of Pokemon. I have played Pokemon for many, many years, starting from Pokemon Blue up until now with the new Pokemon games coming out, Pokemon Sun and Moon, very excited. So because of my many years underneath my Pokemon belt, I can definitely give an informed opinion about the games. The thing is it doesn't take an expert to know the difference between Pokemon Blue and Pokemon Black. We're talking about you, PETA, who keeps pulling this up, even though it has already been addressed in Pokemon Black and White about the Pokemon abuse thing, alright? Okay? It's been done. It's been fucking done, alright? Anyway. If you don't know your differences between your Pokemon generations, don't worry. Don't worry. Don't freak out. It's okay. We will take a breakdown of every Pokemon generation and help you figure out the differences.
From 1996 to 1998, Generation 1 had Pokemon's Red, Green, Blue, and Yellow version.
Generation 2 ran in 1999 and 2000 with the release of Gold, Silver, and Crystal.
Next is Generation 3, from 2002 to 2004, where we got Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, as well as remakes of Red and Green from Gen 1 called Fire Red and Leaf Green.
From 2006 to 2009, Gen 4 gave us Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, and the remakes of Heart Gold and Soul Silver.
Gen 5, running from 2010 to 2012, gave us Black and White, as well as the first direct sequel games in the mainline Pokemon series, Black 2 and White 2. This was the first generation in 10 years to not have a remake in it, leaving a lot of Gen 3 fans really disappointed, despite Gen 5's relative success.
But Gen 3 fans rejoiced when Gen 6, 2013 to 2014, gave us X and Y, as well as Gen 3 remakes Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire.
This brings us to the games that released this year, kicking off Gen 7, Pokemon Sun and Moon, or Sumo, because jokes are funny. That is a lot of games, so it is easy to understand why, when all of them follow the title pattern of Pokemon blank, uninformed parents or non-gamers can get the impression that Nintendo is just pulling a Call of Duty scheme and feeding gamers the same game for 20 years. Happy birthday, by the way.
However, upon closer look, you can see graphical changes, programming improvements, new lands to explore, new trainers to encounter, new gym leaders to conquer, new mechanics that make each generation special and unique, and yes, they all might follow along with the same basic formula of getting 8 badges, beat the Elite Four, then you're done. To simplify Pokemon down to just that would be ignoring an incredible amount of adventure and fun that's to be had away from the main story objective. That would be like saying Ocarina of Time was just hit things with your sword until you saved the princess, or that Fallout 3 was just about finding your dad. Ultimately, that's your goal, but there's so much in between that and where you start that to say the game was just about those things would be asinine.
And for as much crap as we're giving Assassin's Creed and Call of Duty in this video, they too make changes between each story and each installment in their franchise. Even if, from the outside, all those changes look remarkably similar and all blend together into this gigantic Dorito and Mountain Dew scented mess.
Speaking of Call of Duty, there was a new one announced recently, Infinite Warfare, that was received with a general meh impression from fans. That was until they announced the release of a remake of one of the classic Call of Duty games. Then fans went berserk. For as much crap as the COD community gets for enjoying the same old thing each time, the unabashed outpouring of joy that spewed onto the internet as soon as that remake was announced was inescapable as much as we tried.
Now, does that sound familiar at all? It should, because you remember when we mentioned that Gen 5 not bringing us Gen 3 remakes disappointed the fans of Gen 3, only for Auras to be announced and for the Gen 3 fans to go fucking bananas? The fan community was so elated by the announcement of Auras that, by God, if you didn't get it pre-ordered fucking months in advance, you weren't getting that game for months after it came out. There was no store that had a goddamn copy anywhere. It was goddamn insane. The first 3 days, it sold 3 million copies in the first 3 days. And as of a year ago, when I wrote this goddamn script, recent figures had put the sales total at 12 million.
These were fans of Gen 3, myself included, who were very excited to see a brand new Pokemon game. But what exactly were we getting? Were we getting a brand new game with all new Pokemon, or were we just getting Gen 3 revamped? This question has been on many fans' minds ever since, well, Gen 3. When we had remakes like Fire Red and Leaf Green.
This question is super important to a large segment of the Poke community, though a segment not exactly beloved by the rest. The Gen 1ers. These kinds of fans are typically, but not always, fans that believe that the first generation was the best, that they had to formula it down before it got overly complicated, and that it can't get better than the first one, you know? It's the best, it's the original, it's great. And full transparency here, I kinda used to be this fan. Now, I really wasn't against the new games as much, but I just never really got into them. I got to play most of them, at least a little bit, even if it's just on my friends' copies, but I just never got into them the same way that I did my original yellow version, which this is the one I got for my birthday many, many years ago. It's all fucked up looking. This is my original copy. The battery died on it, though, and I lost, like, all of my shit. I fucking cried. I cried. I just felt that Gen 1 was simpler and easier to get into, and like I mentioned before, had the formula down. The problem with that kind of logic is that when I was playing Gen 1, I was a kid! I played this copy of Pokemon Yellow over and fucking over again, countless times, each time insisting that it was going to be a new adventure, even though half the time I kept half the same Pokemon, just transferred them to Red, and then brought them back, and then they wouldn't pay attention to me for like half the fucking game. But yeah, it's weird logic, but again, I was a kid.
I, on the other hand, went with the generations as they came out. Even though that Gen 3 was my absolute favorite, I continued to play the new games, one right after the other, and after a while you kind of get used to it, and they don't really seem very complicated. It is easy to say that the first game's formula was the simplest and the best, but that was because that's all you had. And looking back at it, it was pretty simple. It was a lot like when the TV and phone used to have buttons.
These kinds of clashing points of view were on full display in our failed attempt at a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Yellow, where me, Dan, and Nate all tried to put up with how we felt about the game individually, my love for it clashing with Dan's extreme lack of patience for the programming fuckery and the bugs and the admittedly crappy in comparison presentation of the whole thing, and it all capped off with a long built-up debate between both of us when we were super tired, so of course nothing got resolved here, whether or not Gen 1 games were bad or not.
Ultimately, they're not bad games, but they're sure as shit not as good as the other ones. That's like saying Windows 95 is better than Windows 10. Sure, you always have people complaining about it, but you can't deny that the newer one is just simply better. I mean, try downloading Skyrim on one of those mammoth computers. See how far you get.
After that and a bit of thought about the subject, I decided that after a decade and a half of my favorite Pokemon game being Yellow version, I would change my opinion to it being Leaf Green, the Gen 1 remake from Gen 3. So naturally, he was happy to hear that my new favorite game was from a newer generation, as this meant that I was finally leaving the Gen 1er mindset. Then the next big debate started of whether or not my favorite game really was a Generation 3 game. It was a remake of Generation 1, so shouldn't my favorite generation still be Gen 1 still? Well, as it turns out, it was a bit more complicated than I thought, and yet it was still just as simple.
Dan, and fans with the same mindset as him, say that since it was released with Generation 3's graphics, with Gen 3's engine, with Gen 3's mechanics, and on Gen 3's console, the Game Boy Advance, not to mention that it was released as an official part of Gen 3, so obviously it's a Gen 3 game. While they will concede that it's a remake, they say that to call it just a repackaged version of an older game is just as bothersome as the assumption that all Pokemon games are the same. It follows the same logic, that if the setup is the same, the game is the same. That ignores too many differences, the things that make each game unique, to be a really informed opinion, and while Jacob may have played Yellow for years, this was just too different to be called the same. I mean, look at these games, do they look the same to you?
Then on my side, it also seemed simple. It's Gen 1's story, it's Gen 1's Pokemon, it's Gen 1's name, and it's Gen 1's fans who wanted an update to the game in the first place, so obviously it's a Gen 1 game. It's nice to see an updated looking version, but was it really different enough to be called a completely new game? Well, as I come to realize, kinda? It was more than just an aesthetic change, sure. It was on a more powerful system, it was smoother, less buggy, it made more sense, had better mechanics than before, but was it different enough to call itself its own thing? I guess, but I'd be more comfortable calling it a Gen 1 game as produced by Gen 3, even if that's not exactly a catchy way to say it.
For me, it almost seems obvious. My favorite Gen is Gen 3, Ruby and Sapphire. Then when Oris came out, I was so excited to play Gen 3 again. I wasn't playing it just because it was the new one out, I was playing it because it was Gen 3's Pokemon, Gen 3's region, and Gen 3's story. The upgrades were awesome, and they add a lot to it, but when it comes to remakes, you can't escape the original and still have the new one. Sure, Gen 1 was buggy as hell. Shit didn't make sense at times. Saving in the wrong place would erase your file, the graphics were akin to a TI-82, and while it was great at the time, has not at all aged well. That's what we have remakes for, so people can enjoy the good things about Gen 1 without being hindered by, just look at this thing, what is that even? But to have the remake, you have to have the original, and the original where the Gen lies. Besides, if Fire Red and Leaf Green were really part of Gen 3, why weren't they remade along with Oris? Too many games, I suppose.
The story and region of your favorite generation has a charm to it that old fans are able to enjoy no matter what package it comes in, and the new fans can enjoy what the old fans did without having to be downgraded to inferior technology. It's the same for Heart Gold and Soul Silver, as well as Auras. It makes accessibility not an issue, and when the whole idea behind Pokemon is to play with others, you want everyone to be able to access the game, young or old, older.
It's hard to tell if Gen 7 is going to give us a remake or not, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if they don't. With all that we've said, it is hard to look at Pokemon objectively and not think that it looks played out as hell. Maybe it wouldn't be bad to just enjoy a generation for its new games, instead of banking on the old ones doing well.
Remakes play a very important role for nostalgia, something that is often blamed for holding people back from enjoying new things. Gen 1ers, the bad ones, not just the ones who like the first ones, but the people who are like, it doesn't get any better than this, they're using nostalgia in the wrong way. They're using it to hold down progress. They're likely the reason why X and Y had so many goddamn first-gen Pokemon in the beginning.
Instead, these remakes should be a gateway for new Pokemon fans to play older games without having to grab a Game Boy Color. It's one of the many beautiful things about Pokemon. Whichever side of the argument you are on, you can't deny that Pokemon will lead a legacy that will be enjoyed by many generations to come.
So, there you have it, folks, our opinion on Pokemon remakes and which generation they belong to. I want to thank Ivy McCurdy for helping me on this. Check her website out in the description below, where you'll also find all of my social media shit. And let us know in the comments below what you think about Pokemon Generation remakes. Are they just chained to the generation they came from, or are they new enough to live among the new? Let us know, and thank you all very much for watching this video. Not an episode of anything, it's just an isolated video for fucking once. And I have been the trained unprofessional, speaking for the voices in my head when I say, until next time, fare thee well. Bye, everybody! Say bye, Bri.
I'm not supposed to be here.
But you are now.
I'm not here.
She's not here, but she means bye.